we go again. Welcome back to another episode of the Teens Armory, where we exist with the goal to equip Christian teenagers in today's world and inform anyone who will listen to us. I'm Chris Hernandez, and I'm joined with Hayden Hayes. We're the co-hosts of this show. How's it
Hello,
going,
hello.
Hayden?
Pretty good, pretty good. How about you? How's it been? How's it been over there and where you're at?
I don't know. It's been pretty weird. School started, so it feels
Yeah.
really off. Just so the listeners know out there, we skipped a week because we're changing to bi-weekly. During the school year, we're probably going to do bi-weekly episodes. I think we've announced this before. Sorry for those who were waiting on part two for another week because we accidentally forgot to mention it last week that we were starting
Yeah.
school. So
Mm-hmm.
we're starting school, and it's really weird going back to school after being a whole summer off.
Yeah.
How's it going over
Mm-hmm.
there on your side?
Well, it's really weird getting back into the change, you know. I woke up this morning and immediately went to a breakfast with my family. And after like a big breakfast with a lot of my old relatives, I came back and just grinded out some school homework while listening to Irish music. So hey, I mean, it worked out.
I guess that does work out. It sounds pretty it sounds pretty weird considering that um as school is started, I would expect that
Mm-hmm.
as for me personally, I as I go back to school, I would expect that if everything feels completely weird, but actually it feels just basically like a continuation of last year. Very
Yeah.
similar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we even go to all the same places. So,
Yeah. All but one history change classes.
oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Um, How about as for the listeners, those of you out there who are listening to us, we would like to apologize that we forget to mention a lot of stuff on the beginning part of the podcast. So at
Mm-hmm.
least now we mentioned it. We mentioned it this time. There's a few
Yeah.
things we mentioned in other episodes that we were supposed to mention and we didn't. But
Mm-hmm.
just remember, we're doing bi-weekly from now on. If we're lucky, we might actually launch bonus episodes at certain times in between
Mm-hmm.
weeks, every once in a while, depending on how things go and
Yeah.
depending on the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But as for this episode, let's go right into our joke of the day.
All
All right.
right.
So this today's joke is actually not even a question kind of joke. It's just a statement. Okay, it's
Mm-hmm.
actually a fun fact, and you have to think it through and
Yeah.
think through the words in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so today we are going to think about how spiders are the only web designers who get happy when they find a bug.
Oh my gosh. It's funny because I think I heard this one before you put it on the show, which just makes it a little bit a little bit more funny. But I still like this one. This is a good one.
Come on. You know all the jokes before they get on the show. You hear
Yeah, I
them
do.
first.
I do. Okay. I meant before you put it in the notes. I remember you telling me that.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. That's my bad. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, considering that you know all the jokes before we do it, I mean, it seems pretty convincing. So all you listeners out there, you're the ones who don't know these jokes. Actually, I'm sure that a
Yeah.
lot of these are pretty stereotypical and you've probably heard them before. I mean, you might
Mm-hmm.
have heard them before. And if you have, then I guess it's not as funny. But so in
We're
case
trying
you
our
couldn't,
best.
yeah, we're trying our best. At least we're trying. Doesn't that count?
Yeah, yeah. We get participation points.
Participation, yes. Um, if only that's how it worked all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So in case you couldn't tell, that based on our little joke, we were trying to segue into the digital area, the digital grounds of
Mm-hmm.
social media. So during this episode, we're going to do part two of social media. Last episode, we talked about social media and the dangers of it. In this episode, we're going to focus a little bit more on the side of social media where we try to use it for good, for the
Mm-hmm.
glory of God. And we're going to take a look at that. We're going to see how, if we can, how we can, all those things. We're just going to basically review that.
Yeah.
So now last time we left with that cliffhanger question. I'm not going to lie, that sounded pretty better in theory in my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
So that question was, is social media good or bad, in case anyone forgot out there?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is actually not a yes or no answer. The truth is it's a
Mm-hmm.
tool. It's very
Yeah.
similar to a gun, actually. Guns
Mm-hmm.
aren't evil. There's nothing evil about a gun, but they are similar in this way. They can be used to help or they can be used to hurt. For example, if you have a gun, then you can go hunting and that you can hunt food, and that food can who knows go it can you can use it for other purposes. You can hunt
Mm-hmm.
animals,
Yeah.
all that stuff, but you can also use it for evil. The same can be said with social media. It's possible to use it for good. It is possible to use it for evil.
Mm-hmm.
However, the major difference with social media is how easy it is to access and how the damage is so subtle. We must realize that some things in this world are neutral and some things are not. In the
Mm-hmm.
kingdom of heaven, there is no neutrality.
Mm-hmm.
On earth, to claim neutrality would be a lie. There are either those who put their faith in Jesus Christ for salvation of their sins, and then there are those who remain slaves to their sin. However, as for the things in this world, neutrality is sometimes possible. However, because something is initially neutral does not mean that the effect will be exclusively neutral. For example, a knife does not kill, but rather the person holding it does. A
Mm-hmm.
helicopter doesn't save, but rather the people inside it do. A phone doesn't cyberbully, but the person who's sending the message does. That is the first point I would like to make. In Matthew chapter 11 verses 16 through 19, we see how um let me go read Matthew 11 16 through 19. I'm going to turn to the page where this verse says, "To what should I compare this generation? It's like children sitting in the marketplace who call out to other children. We played a flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang lament, but you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds." So what we see in the context of this verse, we see how Christ is speaking to crowds about John.
Yeah.
My commentary for called the Reformation Study Bible, I mean the Reformation Standard Version, with R.C. Sproul as its general editor,
Mm-hmm.
says these about these verses. People who resist God can always find an excuse for critiquing God's message. Like
Mm-hmm.
children stubbornly complaining that others do not dance to their tune, this generation, in quotes, critiques John for his austerity and conscience indicating call to repentance, then turns around and complains that Jesus' style is too celebratory and welcoming of unseemingly deserving, underserving companions, unquote.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is something about people in the world. For example, if you were to ride on a horse, if a man and a woman were to ride on a horse, the people of the world would say, the poor horse that the people are riding on, they're hurting the poor horse's back. If the people on the horse were to, let's say one of them were to get off, then now the woman's off the horse and only the man's on the horse, then they would say the people of the world would complain that the man on the horse is being rude to his wife for not letting her sit on the horse. If
Mm-hmm.
he were to switch places with his wife and his wife were to sit on the horse, they would complain that he is the one who is not sitting on the horse and doesn't know how to make use of it. And if they both got off the horse, then the people of the world would complain that the people who have the horse are not using it as if it were a horse. That's something about this that's something about the world that we have to learn to deal with. Some people can find a way to critique no matter what you do. And if we are serving God and they critique us, then that is something that we're going to have to learn to face.
Yeah.
That's something that we're going to have to learn to face in this world.
Mm-hmm.
In a world that seems to hate God more every day, we can see these types of people, especially on social media. That's not
Mm-hmm.
neutral. That's against God. And I'm not a defeatist. I know that Christ will return again with glory to judge the living and the dead. That's the Nicene Creed. However, it
Mm-hmm.
seems that things in this world may get worse before they get better. We may not currently face physical persecution, at least not us in America. We are grateful for that. But it does not mean that it is virtually gone. Pun intended. Ha ha. Okay, I guess that's not funny. Beware, listener, when you're on social media. Don't just look at what's on there. Watch it. When you're
Yeah.
listening, be sure you hear what's going into your brain. Whatever is going into your mind, you have to pay close attention to. If
Hmm.
you find yourself easily persuaded, you should distance yourself from these influencers. That's why they're called influencers.
Yeah.
Learn to withstand persecution because persecution is coming. It's important to be prepared when it happens. And that's all my first point. Hayden, what you got, man?
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. You pointed out a lot of interesting facts, and I would like to say some of the goods of social media. I feel like that's what this episode was originally supposed to be, but I do like what you added here, though, the neutrality of it. So I'll mention a few things that how we can use social media for good. One is evangelism. Um, God calls us to make our disciples. In fact, in Matthew 28, 19 through 20, which I got right here, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father. Wow. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age.
Hmm?
Jesus told that to the disciples before he went to heaven. And that is literally the last verse in Matthew as well. Um, so evangelism can be done in many ways. It can be done by baptizing someone or just in fact just spreading the word. I feel like though in today's day and age, spreading the word and is just, it's done, but I don't think I mean, to what I've seen, I cannot see it on social media.
Yeah,
Um,
hold up. I'm gonna stop you right there. You just made a really
mhm.
great point. I don't want the people listening to miss that.
Yeah.
Social media evangelism is a real thing, as Hayden just pointed out. He just pointed out
Hmm.
how we can use it. And evangelism is not just inviting someone to church, because if you just invite someone to church, the church is meant for the believers, not for the unsaved. There's
Yeah.
better ways to evangelism, and I would think that that's a really a great use of using evangelism in social media, if
Hmm.
possible. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really great point.
Yeah. And you, Chris, you've used evangelism, which I really respect that. But social media evangelism is possible and it is very powerful too. Because so many people use social media today. What happens if they see yours? They're gonna be like, oh, this is pretty cool. And also, I'm noticing a lot of problems in my life. Maybe I should, listen more or, learn about more. Or they could react by, yeah, I'm not gonna listen to that. Or they could react by just being overall rude and mean. But either way, they still heard it. They heard the message and they reacted. That's how you know how they heard the message, a reaction.
For those of you who don't think that that simple text on words can save people, remember that words have been saving for thousands of years. The
Mm-hmm.
Bible is written on words, and so many people have gotten saved through the Bible alone without anyone speaking to them personally. It's possible to save through this way. That's what I would just like to add for anyone who thinks that it's impossible to ever save someone with a message or a gospel tract or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. I totally just forgot what I was saying. Oh, right. A reaction, you know, it can be, really bad or really good, right? But a reaction nonetheless is still, you know, them hearing and then them saying or thinking of their opinion on this.
Hmm.
I'll go ahead and move to point two. Showing what is right using any social status to spread the word and deny evil. You could be the biggest social media star or the lowest of lows and still do this. Even if you're a big popular, social media influencer, right? That's a good thing. And you should use this the people, like the fact that you get this many views or this many follows, right? To spread the word. Because now there's more people who are already tuned in, they'll listen.
Hmm.
um Even if you have no social status, you can still do it. I mean, anyone, will anyone, I'm open to any ears, and so I assume many people who are lost will also be open to any ears or open to any mouths, not ears.
Yeah.
um but yeah, that oh, I have another verse for that. First Peter 3:15. Let me see if I can get there. I was I was trying to turn to it ahead of time, but then I got lost track. All right. First Peter 3:15. All right. All right. First Peter 3:15. But in your hearts honor Christ, the Lord, as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason, for hope, for the hope that is in you. Yet do this with gentleness and respect.
Mm.
So if anyone, decides not to, listen to you, you always treat them with, love and respect, just like the verse says. And in all you do, obey Christ, honor Christ.
Hmm.
That's a big thing that you're going to hear a lot through this podcast episode about
Yeah.
social media. I'm going to go ahead and move to to the third point. That is using social media as a tool to learn and teach. This is mainly one of the good things of social media. During the pandemic, right? We couldn't see each other. We couldn't go to
Yeah.
school. But then Zoom, which also is what we use to record our podcast, right, is a tool that we can use for good and that our teachers can use to teach us and lead us into the world, right? So really, it's really what Christopher said, right? It's neutral or not new. Yeah, it is neutral. It's how we use it. Social media.
Yeah.
All right. I also want to point out another good point. Sorry. And also another good point is not to virtue signal. By this, I mean don't be looked at like as a nice person. Don't do this just for the attention. This is a worldly thing, and we are not of the world, we are in the world.
Right. Right.
Instead, we should do it for others and bring them to Christ. I like to say one more thing before I throw it back to Chris. Colossians 3:17. Let me see if I can get here. Uh, this is really far back, actually. Okay. Wait, I pass it? Ah, here it is. Okay. 3:17. And whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Give thanks to the God and Father through him. I kind of butchered that a little bit because I read too fast and can't speak the same speed. But this is a point that I pointed out earlier that I told you you'd be hearing, right? We should use social media to glorify God. And here's one of my call to actions. If you aren't or haven't thought about it, I encourage you to do this. Unsubscribe from those who are supporting what is evil. Stop listening to those who tell you evil things. And stop downloading apps that can lead you into addiction and take time away from God. Don't watch movies that have a bad message or that are made by companies that support evil things. Disney is one of these. My family is going to cancel Disney Plus pretty soon because of all the bad things they're supporting and what they're doing with their money. Um, this is just something that we should, not hold to. Disney Plus, right, shouldn't be an idol. So we should be willing to also give it up because of, because of how, evil the company is. Another point I like to make is that, gosh, I lost my other point. Glorifying God. Use social media to glorify God. Use the methods I told you, evangelism, showing what is right, to spread the word and glorify God. Social media doesn't have to be a bad platform that is looked down upon, right? Us Christians can make it into a good way to evangelize to people who are in other countries, people who are unreachable, right? People that instead of, flying over, which I do agree with missionaries. I love missionaries and I respect what they do, but we could also be missionaries ourselves through social media. Actually, no, that's not true.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, evangelists through social media. And I feel like that's what we should do. We should help our Christian brothers and sisters that are overseas, right, by giving the word of God to these other people in other countries. In conclusion, social media, like all things, can be used for evil, but you, the listener, and us, the podcasters, can use it for good and must use it for good. And that's
Right.
all I have to say on this topic. Chris, back to you.
Right. 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 That's really good. I like the point where you were showing how we can use it for good and how we should avoid virtue signaling. As a matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
I have more to add on virtue signaling itself.
Mm-hmm.
So when we use social media for the glory of God, we can do that in many ways, as Hayden just explained. You can promote good values. You can spread the word. You can you you can evangelize. You can also alert people of when the secularism advances to help warn other Christians. But when
Mm-hmm.
we face these things, it's important to consider um, what do we consider good. Let's not slip into the other side of things, which is virtue signaling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, When we, just to clarify, just to repeat what Hayden said, when we virtue signal, we're doing something to be looked at as a good person. Now we know there's no such thing as a good person. I mean, we know there's no such thing as a good person because no one is righteous, no, not one. But virtue signaling makes all the virtues that you do seem big. After all, Jesus
Mhm.
himself said that. Jesus said that when you give, you are not to let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. That's
Mhm.
like Matthew 6:3 and 4, I think. When we use social media for the glory of God, we should not virtue signal. We should avoid it.
Mhm.
Virtue signaling can be really easy to do. After all, let's say you would give something to someone, maybe
Mhm.
someone who's poor or in poverty. You do
Mhm.
that, you record it, you post it on social media, everyone likes it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, because of that, what you're doing is you're being like the Pharisees, which are mentioned in
Mhm.
Matthew 15, verses 8. I'll read Matthew 15, verse 8 and 9. These people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. They worship me in
Mhm.
vain, teaching as doctrines human command. This is something that is so um, easy to fall into
Yeah.
if if you find yourself on social media because it's easy to virtue signal to show all the good things you are doing. But we
Mhm.
have to remember we have to do this in private. If your left hand is not to know what your right hand is doing, how much more should the world not know all your good virtues?
Mhm.
Instead, when you use social media for the glory of God, make yourself humble. Eh,
Mhm.
Try to remain not known as the person who's done many great things. Try. We should instead try to be humble, and we should show
Yeah.
humility.
Mhm.
And so that's all I have to say on this part. I think we're about to close this episode. Let's just
Yeah.
review what we've covered so far. First of all, we covered neutrality. The neutrality, the neutrality of a something does not mean that it will have a neutral output and a neutral result. So,
Mhm.
such as social media, we have to understand the dangers of thinking it's neutral and how it can quickly be turned from that. We have to important. It's important to realize how we can use it for the glory of God. Hayden specified that a lot.
Mhm.
It's very important. Now, there's something I would like everyone to hear, all the listeners out there to listen. Let's look at Mark chapter 9, sorry, verse 43. If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than with two hands and go into hell, where the fire never goes out. Now, I would just like to say that let's not misinterpret this verse by saying, oh, my hand's causing me to sin, so I need to actually cut it off.
Yeah.
Um, that interpretation of the verse is a little bit too literal. Not
Mhm.
everything in the verse is telling it. Not everything in the Bible is supposed to be taken literally. That's why Jesus spoke in lots of parables. He
Yeah.
wasn't speaking of exactly how we should act like the people in the parables, but rather resemble them in certain ways. So this is where the social media comes in. If Christ isn't telling us if the God's word isn't telling us to actually cut off our hand,
Mhm.
although in extreme cases I would say that maybe you could if it's that bad.
Yeah.
But I would say what's going on here is to cut off things in your life, to cut off parts of you that are not helpful. Social media could easily become a part of you. This is You can become so used to it's grown on you. It's become
Mhm.
a part of you. But
Mhm.
if social media is causing you to stumble, if it's causing you to if it's causing you to lead to sinfulness, you don't need that. You need to delete that app. You need to delete what's ever causing this. And yes, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt when you cut off your hand as much as when you it's gonna hurt whenever you delete that app and you get rid of it permanently.
Mhm.
But that's the point. It's better to go enter life maimed than to go into hell where the fire never goes out.
Mhm.
So you have to realize the importance of this. If you can't If you can't control yourself, and trust me, a lot of people really can't,
Hmm.
especially teenagers, then you need to get rid of that app. You have to get rid of it. Just remember Mark 9:43. All right.
Hmm.
Do you have any final
Yeah.
thoughts that we should add onto this? I mean, onto our
No,
episode?
I think you summarized it pretty good. I guess I'll go ahead and do the outro here. Um, thank you all for listening to us ramble. I do think this is I'm pretty sure this might be one of our shorter episodes, but it's definitely probably one of our best, I'd say. Um, I'd like to ask you to please give us a 5-star rating review and share us with your friends. That could be a
Yes.
form of evangelism. It's a decent one too. Um,
Well, we should do an episode for that. We should do an episode like just for unbelievers.
hmm, I do
Something
like
to
that idea.
consider.
Well, let's put that in the notes after the show. All right. I like to thank, Christopher's dad and shout him out. His podcast is called Solocast for anyone, who's a bit older and, you know, wants a bit more theology based and a little bit well, they're okay, let's cut that out. Their slogan is high theology for the average man, and they deal with a lot of topics that are a bit older, but good nonetheless. I also
Hmm.
like to shout out Hearts for the Lost. We talked a lot about evangelism today, and I think that they'll help a lot if you ever want to get into evangelism. Heck, their whole podcast is about evangelism, so I
Yeah.
hope you'll, you know,
Also, shout out to my brother for letting me borrow his mic to record.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a very good mic. Oh yeah,
Thanks.
and my brother for letting me just completely use his microphone. I mean, he kind of almost trashed it, so I guess it really was me saving the mic. But hey, thanks for him for getting the mic, I guess. Um, I guess that's all we have to say. I'll go ahead and say the funny line.
All
Shield
right.
of faith.
Shields
Shields
up.
up.